All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 364 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. This is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of healthy marriage and family, trying to get married as young as possible in a healthy way according to God's design. My name is Seth Hensley. I come on the show twice a week, every week on Thursday and Sunday to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but I try to equip you and encourage you in your pursuit of those goals. And today we're going to be reviewing a video by Jeff Bethke, Jeremy Pryor, and family teams. It was published recently, and it's basically on whether or not having children is expensive, is something that is too expensive. And a lot of people will act like children are the reason that they're having financial trouble and stuff like this. And so we're just going to kind of talk about today what is the financial burden of having a child? What are the financial benefits of having a child? Is it a financial pressure? Is it a financial contribution? Why do people often talk about the expense of having a child, stuff like that? And so, yeah, we're gonna get into that and listen to these two dads talk about this. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hear them set this conversation up, how they talk about it, and then you'll get my reaction in a second.
Has it become too expensive to have kids? I think it's around $300,000 it costs to raise a kid today. So Jeff and I are going to discuss this. Andrew Bagley had a great video that I think unpacked the problem brilliantly, but does not actually get into the solution. So listen to every part of how he describes the problem. Jeff and I are going to dive into this, but then we're going to look at how can we think about this totally differently. So check this out.
Children didn't get expensive, they got unnecessary, and that should terrify you. Here's a comparison that sounds insulting until you sit with it. Children are like horses. In the early 1900s, major cities were drowning in horses. They powered transportation, hauled goods, made economies move. People didn't keep horses because they loved horses. They kept them because they needed them. Then Henry Ford dropped the Model T. Within a few years, the need collapsed, not because horses got more expensive, but because cars did the job better. Today, the only people who keep horses are the ones who genuinely love them, despite the cost, the mess, and the work. An economist named Catherine Pakaluk argues children are going through the same transition, and the data backs her up. For most of human history, children met three needs nobody had to consciously think about. They worked in the fields, in the family business, and in the household economy. They provided security. If something happened to you, older children kept things running, and they were your retirement plan. Not metaphorically, literally. Then machines replaced the labor, insurance and dual income replaced the security, and Social Security replaced the retirement math. The need didn't.
Okay, whoa. Okay, so he's talking about a lot of how children's role has been replaced here, but I do want to pause him and say here, have those things replaced children, or are they simply trying to do the job that children can do, and will do? I would say if they're raised correctly, it's like here's the and if they are substituting, if they are replacing the role that children had, are they doing it efficiently? Are they doing it well? And I think if you ask yourself the answer to those questions is usually and often no. But that's what people are choosing to do anyway nowadays, either because they're believing false narratives about what it means to be a parent and have children and raise kids, or they actually believe that these things work better, as, like he said, a retirement plan and things like this. And it's like, I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Paid slowly. It got systematically outsourced, program by program, technology by technology, until one day, children were just optional. But here's the part that should actually unsettle you. Your grandparents didn't decide to have kids. That's just what you did. The default. You're the first generation that has to actively choose it, against a culture that models the good life as optimized, unencumbered, and free. Behavior.
Well, here, I'll also pause him there really quick and say, it's still the default. It's just that people are now have the technology to try and choose not to do it, because contraception is what, of course, is enabling all of this. But if you're married, if you have any kind of sexual relationship, the natural overflow of that, unless you get in the way with technology, is children. So it's not like that. It's not like children became, not the default. The default is still children. It's just that we are choosing to use our technology to get in the way of the default, if that makes sense. Like, there hasn't been a change in the way the world works. There has simply been an increase in our ability to impede the way the world works, if that makes sense. So I don't think, like, kids are still the default. In order to not have kids, you still have to make the conscious choice not to do it, or at least I would say you don't even have control over whether or not you have children, because contraception is not really contraception. and it doesn't work 100% of the time. And so I'm just like, I know people who have gotten pregnant on two forms of birth control. And so the point there being, you think you have control, but you really don't. Now, I do think you have some input, and I think that's where it gets into the discussion of whether or not birth control is ethical. If you have to ask the Catholics, then it's immoral, which I actually do think they have a lot of good points on that. I'm starting to just realize how much that is messing up. Like, it is true, the contraception is messing up so much, and I am not convinced that it is a moral option. Um, now, I'm still I'm still thinking a lot about this, but as of right now, I don't really think that's a moral option. I know that sounds kind of extreme in our modern world of individualism and autonomy and self fulfillment and having fun and personal growth and all that stuff, but yeah, I do think that, but also isn't that radical in the sense that for thousands of years of human history, that was not an option, and that was not normal at all, yes, but not possible either. And so when it becomes possible, that does raise questions of whether or not it should be done, if that makes sense. Um, because and we're having to ask ourselves that question now in a way that nobody else has. But that doesn't mean that having children is no longer the default, because again, God has designed this universe to work a certain way, and having children is the natural overflow of a sexual relationship, which of course people are still having. So now they are having less sexual relationships than before in previous years, which may shock you, but you can look up the data on that. That's not um, an opinion. That's just common knowledge at this point. Sadly, people are not, and I think that's largely in part thanks to pornography and the widespread availability and easy accessibility of a substitute sexual relationship that has no difficult parts attached. But yeah, I don't think children ever, you know, I don't think that having children ever left being the default. I think we just now kind of idealize and worship to this culture of getting in the way of that we hadn't in previous decades.
Real science is unambiguous about what happens when something shifts from default to deliberate opt-in. Participation collapses. No subsidy fixes a default shift. Japan tried bonuses, incentives, paid parental leave for years. Birth rates kept falling. Because you can subsidize diapers, you can't subsidize desire. The fertility crisis isn't just an economic problem. It's a meaning problem. Ask almost any parent who genuinely loves their kids whether they'd wish they'd had fewer. Almost none of them say yes.
I just really didn't even know I could love like that. It's really, my priorities shifted completely to them. They turned my world upside down, or in the best way.
So why does the story we're telling make it feel like the obvious answer is no?
All right. Yeah. Jeff, what stood out to you?
Okay, before we get into Jeff and Jeremy's reaction, so that was the video that they're reacting to. I do want to show you the replacement fertility rate, and I'm going to go all the way down here, and you can see this is the chart that I commonly use for fertility rate. He briefly referenced that there and showed a source. I'm going to show you one as well. This is from the National Vital Statistics Reports, Volume 74, Number 3, March 6th of 2025. So very recent data. This is within the last year. As of the time this is being recorded, the date is 5/30/2026, which, by the way, is the day before our child's due date. So can we just pause and appreciate that? I am one day. Well, we're probably going to be induced because we just don't know if the baby is going to come by that time. But I'll tell you one more thing. I definitely wouldn't recommend, and I don't think doctors recommend this either nowadays, for those of you who are new parents or soon to be parents, or want to be parents one day. Just keep this in mind. This is what my wife and I are going to do, and I think it is something that could be helpful for you. I would not go very far past your due date, if at all past your due date, if possible, because, and this is an issue that I think, this is what I think caused my mom's pregnancy with me to be harder, is your baby just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it becomes harder and harder to deliver. And there's always the possibility that your baby could have his or her first bowel movement in utero, and that of course creates health complications for the child. And so I just I'm telling you this because this is what I've heard my sister-in-law, who's a nurse and works on the labor and delivery floor of a local hospital, say, and also just because of my anecdotal evidence that I've seen, just people over and over having a harder time if they have a late birth. And this is also reinforced by what our doctor is telling us, because our doctor is telling us today that because of those things and because the baby's getting bigger and things like this, it's just easier to on mother and child and safer on both to not go that far past your due date and be induced. So consider that. I think that's what my wife and I are going to do. But let's get back to this birth rate thing. So this is the actual and adjusted total fertility rates of the United States. You can see that 2.1 line. I wish I could zoom in a little bit for you. I don't know if I can do that or not. Let me see if there's a plus here. Yeah, look at this. There we go. No. Well, okay. Here's what I'll do. I'll just pull it up and I won't fully present for you because it makes it harder for you to see. So I'm just going to zoom in here. Yeah, like this. So this is the actual and adjusted total fertility rates. You can see the 2.1 line is replacement, which makes sense. I mean, all that means is it takes two parents to make one child. And so to replace ourselves as a population, because we are constantly, I mean, once you're born, you are going to die, kind of is the idea behind that. So if you got two parents who are going to die, in order to replace themselves, they need to have two children. So replacement rate has to be just 2 or right above 2 or something right there. 2.1 is where it's setting it. But this is the different ages, okay? So the actual fertility rate here through the years at 2023, we're down to like 1.7 to 1.5, which is not, we're below replacement rate, which means we're actually a population in decline. And then you can see it for the different ages. And here's another point another reason to get married younger and start having children younger and having a family younger. You don't have that issue as much because if you'll look right here, in fact, maybe I'm going to put my camera small and I'll give you the this camera big. Maybe that helps a little bit for you to be able to see. What happens if you don't do that? Look at this line right here. You have the blue line. The highest contributors to replacing the population, even though they're still not making it to that replacement rate on average, is the ages of 20 to 24. And I would say that's just because your body's better set up to have children at that age. And there's going to be more success stories of attempts to have children at that age than there are at these other ages right down here, like 35 to 39. You can see that one's pretty low. 40 and older, pretty low. Still higher than the 35 to 39 for some reason, though. That's probably a generational mentality or something like that. I'm not sure what's going on there, but you can see here of all of them, the 20 to 24-year-olds are having the most kids, but it's still not at replacement rate. It's still not at the 2.1 replacement rate. And so that's just something interesting to consider when you're looking at this kind of thing. And you need to ask yourself, like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm sure Jeff and Jeremy are going to get into that. But I think what we're doing is this is why I don't like it when people talk about how expensive kids are. It's like, okay, first of all, you're probably spending way more money on your either addictions, hobbies, personal fulfillment endeavors, things like this. Like, all right, I'll just, let me give some practical examples. This is not me throwing out some jabs at anybody in particular. I don't really have anybody in mind when I say this. I'm literally just talking. This is not personally motivated, and I'm not trying to attack anybody. So I just want to get that out there. But if you're saying children are so expensive over and over and over, and you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on your hobbies or your vape or your cigarettes or your car projects or I know I'm getting specific here, but I'm doing that because I want people to realize that we spend a lot of money on things that are not necessary and not even morally, applaudable. And so if you're saying you're willing to spend money on those things, but you're not willing to spend money on children, you're really reflecting a poor evaluation of what matters more. And again, that just goes back to morality, and morality always goes back to scripture and how God's designed the universe to work. So I'm not really talking to people here on this podcast who are non-believers and who do not believe who are either atheists or who do not believe the morality of scripture is how we should, govern and live our lives. I'm talking to the young people who actually already believe that stuff. I'm not trying to convince you here on that. I'm assuming you've already done that, gone through that process elsewhere. I'm talking to people who are Christians already and are kind of deciding whether or not to have children, whether or not having children is a good thing. And I'm addressing the fact that we're saying they're so expensive, but we're spending our money elsewhere. We're spending more money on other things than we are on having children and complaining about how expensive children are. Do you see how what a problem that is? And to me, it says there's some kind of dishonesty going on there. There's some motivation. There's some complaint that's not quite justified because we're complaining about something while doing something that's more detrimental to our finances in the other corner. And it comes down to investments, okay? It comes down to investments because you can put money into children. There's a lot of money that goes into children, but children are an investment and not just a sinkhole for your money because there's actually a reward. There's an ROI. There's a return on investment that comes from having children that you can't get in any other way, or at least not to the extent that you can. For example, let's talk about the guy in the clip talked about retirement plans. What's your retirement plan? Because your retirement plan really comes down to this. Let's talk about past retirement. Let's talk about when you're super elderly and can't really take care of yourself. Okay, what's your plan for that stage in life? And I can tell you the plans that exist. Okay, this is why Social Security and stuff will never replace children because it can't do as good a job. Okay, your plans for that time in your life, you may not have thought about it yet, but I'll tell you what your options are. Your options for that time in your life are either have people to take care of you, have children to take care of you, or pay someone else's children to take care of you. That's what it comes down to. Okay, you can live in a nursing home, you can be put in an assisted living facility and pay other people's children to take care of you, or you can raise your own children to take care of you at that time in life. Okay, and both of those have good things about them. I'm not dissing nursing homes. My wife works in a nursing home. I'm just talking about, worked. She's actually quit. We're now a single income household, and I'm actually really excited about that. That's a whole other discussion. And you might wonder, why are you happy about being a single income house, or do you have less money coming in? Yes, but we also have more time, and our home economy is cared for while I'm away at work, and so we don't end up outsourcing all of the chores that we were unable to do while we were at work when we get home. In other words, we don't just DoorDash when we get home because we're too tired to cook dinner because we were both working a full-time job. Now somebody's home to cook dinner, and it makes everything easier for everybody, and we actually cut our spending back even though we make less money, if that makes sense. Because again, we actually are, our home economy is cared for. It's not uncared for throughout the day. But moving back to my point, I just hit my mic. Sorry if that sounded weird. But back to my point, which was what? Where was my? Okay, you're either raising your own children to take care of you in your old age, or you're paying someone else's children to do that. And a lot of people don't think that far into their life, but that's a way that children can't really be placed in an efficient way. I think, and that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, so just keep this replacement rate in mind when you're realizing like this. That's not a good thing. The declining population is not a good thing because it means we don't have as many contributors. And you might say, well, people are just drains on society. It's like, well, okay, yeah, some are. How about you raise one of the contributors? Okay, how about you raise one of the contributors? Because the way this changes is when you're actually reaching future generations. How do you reach future generations? Through children. I'll tell you one thing, guys, like these videos I'm making today, nobody's going to watch them. Barely anybody watches them anyway, but nobody's going to watch them when I'm gone. You know how I can reach into the future after I'm gone is through children. Okay, so if I'm trying to produce a lasting change here, then the way to do that is obviously through having children and not through any other kind of, substitutionary means of impacting future generations. But let's get back into what Jeff and Jeremy say here about that video, that clip we just watched.
A clip. It sounds like a fairly dire problem.
Yeah, no, that was a great clip. The metaphor is perfect with the horses. I think, yeah, the problem diagnosis is really, really well done. And it's that we don't need kids anymore for the goals and incentives we have set up in the world. And so then
well, again, see, I know it's easier not to have children, but I can't quite get on board with the idea that we don't need children because, again, there are things that children do that nobody else can. For example, like what we just talked about, you taking care of you when you're super old. Like when you're elderly and cannot take care of yourself, you're either being taken care of by the people that you raised to take care of you when you're older, or you're paying somebody else's children to take care of you. And in either case, you're being cared for by the younger generation, by the children. Okay, so I don't see how they can be replaced in that capacity. Okay, also as far as companionship goes, a lot of people. I mean, your children are going to be with you your whole life. I mean, in all likelihood, I know there are outliers and marginal examples of how that can be untrue sometimes, but as a general rule, your kids live longer than you. So they're a source of companionship for your whole life, and they're somebody that they can take care of you your whole life, somebody that you can again, impact future generations, that's a way you can impact future generations that you can't substitute out. Like, you, again, with these videos example, nobody's going to watch these videos when I'm gone. Barely anybody watches them now. It's not an efficient way to impact the future. What is an efficient way to impact the future is having children, because they not only will they impact the future, but their children. Again, if you raise children to have children, then you're getting a multi-generational, like 3, 4, 5 generations out, maybe indefinitely, as long as your children keep doing, recreating their children, raising their children the way they were raised. Then you've got a really far reach into the future. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of years. And so, yeah, I don't think children can be replaced in that way. They're not like horses in the sense that the car can just replace them, like that guy said in that clip. Now, I know there are things that help, that make it easier for people to not have children, but they still lose out on stuff. Like, yeah, okay, you have Social Security now. Yeah, you have dual income households that make it less relevant, for less needed, for you to have a bunch of employees running your household economy now. But that doesn't mean that children are replaced. Because again, I don't think Jeff and Jeremy think that either. They're going to agree with me in a second. But that guy in the video that said they were that there was no longer a need, and that they were no longer, it wasn't the default. I don't know that is exactly true. Again, because the children are just the natural overflow of a sexual relationship, which people will have and are having and have always had. So it's like, children, unless you're getting in the way of it, again, with contraception, children are still the default. People are choosing to ignore the default. And maybe that's what he means by default. Like, I do know, like I just showed you over here in this chart, we do have that declining marriage rate right here. So we do have less people choosing to have children, but that doesn't mean that, the natural default, the way the world is designed to work and works the most naturally, is still through having children, because they're the overflow of a sexual relationship. Okay. But as for the reason, I mean, I don't know. Let's continue to see what Jeff and Jeremy say. I want to see them further flesh this out.
That kind of becomes the question. Is that appropriate? Is that right? Is that wrong? Because again,
Yeah.
we needed kids early 1900s to plow the fields, to do the work, to help the family. And so I know we'll jump into solutions in a little bit, but I think that's a big part too, is that the big shift in the last 120 years has basically been from turning kids into an asset into a liability.
Yeah.
And that's been detrimental to the family, right?
Yeah.
The kids, you literally, it was hard to have a flourishing life without children 150 years ago. And now,
but it is easier than ever to have a quote unquote flourishing life without children now. But that still does not mean that they are obsolete and that they provide no value today, that cannot be replicated by other things. Again, I've talked about these examples several times. Who's going to take care of you when you're older? It's either someone you pay or it's your own children. Okay, who's going to be a source of companionship in all likelihood until you go in the ground? Your children. Okay, who's going to be the means by which you reach into future generations and impact them? It's not going to be your work. It's going to be your children. Okay, all these things. And okay, let's talk about if you're like, well, you could get a dog for the companionship front. Okay, dogs are a temporary form of companionship that's very limited. They don't speak to you. They die sooner than you do. You'll go through like 6 sets of dogs before you die. And children are an actual human being that you can communicate with and build a bond with on a much deeper level. And I would say anyone who tells you you can build a deeper bond with a dog than you can with a child has baggage. That's just something I'm going to posit to you. So you can't just substitute other means for children, because children provide things that cannot be replicated by other, substitutionary measures.
now, in a consumeristic, capitalistic society, the more kids, I don't think it tends to mean this, but the vision is sometimes tends to believe that it's going to take more from us, and it's actually going to be more of a liability. The other part, I don't think actually...
And it depends on how you raise your kids. I mean, if you raise them to be consumers and liabilities, then they're going to grow up and do that, and then raise their children the same if they have them at all, which they probably won't, because again, they were raised to do whatever they want, and if anything demands anything from them, they're likely to run from that road. But if you raise children to be contributors, if you raise children to take care of other people, and if you raise them with values and morals that come from Scripture, and if you teach them the right way and teach them how to walk in the right way, and teach them what we do as this family, teach them what we do as this culture, teach them what we do as this team, and they are raised to raise their children the same, then you have this multi-generational expansive movement that's multiplying exponentially with every generation that goes by, and everybody's getting wealthier, everybody's getting more happy, everybody's getting more fulfillment, everybody's getting more flourishing, because they're choosing to do that. Okay, so it depends on how you raise kids. This all goes back to how you raise your kids. Okay, and that's not an irrelevant topic here.
We'll talk about too that also kind of was the double helix to make this a stronger problem is actually like world health. And what I mean by that is one of the complementary problems with this is, for lack of a better term, sociologists kind of talk about how people had 7, 8, 9, 10 kids in all of human history before 1900s, almost as insurance, because they knew only 3 were going to make it to 15. They knew only 4 of them were going to make it to age 12. And so that's a really interesting part too, that like everything from health to vaccines to vitamins to doctors to medical fields to all these things have made it where like we no longer have to do that. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. If those are just kind of the observations of what is true. But yeah, has this been a slow burn, or was it actually pretty dramatic and we've just been living in it? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's the observation that your grandparents did not decide to have children.
Yeah.
And you have to. And no civilization has ever had to face this as a choice the way that we do today, because we have the technology to block it. We have the technology to develop lifestyles that really grate deeply against having children. We have the technologies in terms of our politics or our government to be able to provide for people in their old age. We have alternatives to children. And so in every way, it feels like a blessing. Like, let's just create every alternative in the world so that we absolutely do not have to need children. And so they're always a choice. And more
Again, we're trying to do that, though. I don't think that we've necessarily done that, even with Social Security and dual income, no kids, financial arrangements and stuff like this. We have not replaced the benefit of having kids. Like, okay, let's put it in perspective like this. Everybody's talking about how expensive diapers are. Let's compare whatever number they throw out to how expensive it is to be put into a nursing home and have other people's children care for you when you're elderly. Let's compare those numbers, because there's no competition, there's no contest. So you can complain about kids being expensive now, but if you're not thinking long term, you're not thinking about how expensive it would be to not have children if you raise those children as consumers instead of contributors. Because let me tell you, if you raise your children as consumers instead of contributors, or if you choose not to have children, you are throwing a massive financial bomb into your future that has a fuse, yes, that's not running out right now for you, but that fuse is going to run out one day and it's going to blow up, and then you're going to realize, holy cow, it's expensive to not have children. Okay, yeah, sure. There's some expenses to having children, sure, but if you think long term, if you think about the income that your kids are capable of generating for the family, assuming again that we don't do these financial resets with the nuclear family and just have everybody separate and start over. And even if you do that, they still can take care of you with their finances. If you fall on hard times, you need a broader, security net, and that's a way better alternative than Social Security, which again doesn't give you that much money. So you can say it's expensive to have children, but in the long term, it's actually a better financial option to have children because they take care of you more than the government ever will, and it's less expensive to do that than it is to pay other people's children to take care of you in a nursing home. And so, yeah, anytime somebody throws out the claim that it's just ridiculous to have children because of how expensive it is and diapers and all this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know it's expensive, but if you look at the medium to long-term game here, it's the much more financially savvy option, okay? Definitely more smart than the option of not having children or having children and raising them as consumers.
choice is always better. And this is where we're sort of bumping up against this real strange conundrum, which is, have we gotten so too free? like so that yes, you have a choice, but does somebody who's like 23 years old have the wisdom to decide on their own whether or not they're going to want to have kids when they're 40, 50, 60? Because you have to decide, younger. And so this is where a lot of kids are starting to get confused. And as they get older, you've got this strange problem of I think they're calling it something like, unplanned childlessness, an epidemic of unplanned childlessness, that the average woman who's 30 and wants to have children, but is unmarried, has a less than 50% likelihood of ever having a kid. And that
that point he just made, I think that goes back to the fact that if when you have the contraception in your mind as a means of controlling whether or not and when you have children in your mind, again, I'm not saying that actually works, but people have that in their mind, and so they just think they have total control of it, and so they're like, oh, it's not a convenient time for me to do it, I'll just put it off till next year. It's not a convenient time for me to do it, I'll just put it off till next year. I've got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. That's something that people tell themselves over and over, until what they don't realize is that it gets harder and harder for you to have children as you get older. And there's no guarantee that you will get pregnant and have children as you get older. And so, in order to maximize, again, with the reference to the point I made about children being a financial blessing, with reference to that point, if you're wanting to have children, it's smarter to do it earlier in life when your body is more likely to be able to do that and have less health consequences for you, yes, but also just make it more likely to happen. And again, if you see children as a blessing, you want more of them and not less. And so there's no reason to put it off and postpone it into the future.
The number's actually getting lower. I think it's all the way down to 28 years old now. I mean, it's just a very weird problem.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where I think it feels illusory to people, or it feels like an illusion, where the biggest challenge with this problem is, I would say, most people don't start realizing the Kool-Aid they have drank until they start already getting to the tail end of the years of the regret, where it might be either too difficult to have it, or there's going to be a lot of uphill challenges to it.
And that's the scary part of this. That's the scary part of this. You don't realize the cup you drank was poison until it's already too late and the antidote is not guaranteed to work. Okay, that's the scary situation that you find yourself in if you, again, are postponing and postponing and postponing. Is there's one day, there is going to be a day when it is too late. And you don't know when that day is. You're postponing it and postponing it and postponing it without knowing what that day is for you. Okay? And that's the scary part. And the other scary part is if there's a time gate on this, on having children, and you don't know whether or not you're going to regret it, that is another serious problem, because if it's time gated and you don't know whether or not you're gonna regret it, that means there's a possibility that you miss that time gate window, and then you're full of regret, and there's really nothing you can do at that point. And so that's, I don't know. We just people, children and young adults just need to be educated on this, because it's a big decision, and there are real life consequences to this.
Have children then. So that's the really challenging part about it, is I feel like people start asking themselves more soul-searching questions of like, hold on, is the narrative the culture's given me right? Should I question it with, no inhibition? Is there something wrong with it? Should I have kids? Should I have had kids earlier? Is my career the most important thing? I feel like we're not asking those questions till 35, 38, 42. And then some people kind of go,
then it's too late.
I bought a bill of goods that kind of was bankrupt to some degree. And of course, everyone takes a different journey. We all know that. But I mean, it's inarguable that, 97% of people have kids and have families and have for, before age 24 in all of human history. And so I think having to wrestle with that is really significant.
Yeah. It's difficult when you think about, like, isn't a child-free life where you get to optimize everything for your own preferences, why wouldn't that be superior as a lifestyle choice? Now, there was a post.
Well, again, let's look. He'll go into it too, but I'll give you some ways that's not a good lifestyle choice. So the dual income, no kids household, which I think is great while you don't have children. Like, that's what Lainey and I did when we were not pregnant, and that enabled us to save up a lot of money. But I don't think that, I think it would have been stupid of us to postpone our having children in order to have that financial blessing more in the long term. Because think about it, you just end up outsourcing all of the things that you're required to do anyway, with that extra money. So you kind of end up with about the same money as you would if you were a single income household with children, with no wasted expenses. Okay, because usually what the dual income no kids movement does, I mean, sure, you can save a lot. That's good. That's really good. But often people aren't saving with that. They're just buying stuff that they don't actually need, that's not making their future life easier. It's not an investment. It's just a way to spend money now that provides me some instant gratification. And that's what'll come back and bite you in the butt in later years, and then you'll really realize children are the cheaper option, because you're still having to spend all this money and you didn't invest in somebody to take care of you when you're older. So there is that whole component, but there's also the component of the satisfaction component. Like, if you ask people who have children and have all the amazing things that come with money, what matters more to them, they will always talk about their relationships. They'll always talk about their children, the bonds that they've built with them. That's what matters to them. It's not all the money that they make or all the nice things that they have. Okay. And you can really clearly see that line. And that line is, I mean, that's something that's true, as far as I know, through all ages. I've heard people of all ages say that their relationships are more important to them than their material belongings, regardless of what season of life they're in. It doesn't matter. Like, you have young people saying that, you have middle-aged people saying that, you have old people saying that. So that remains true for your whole lifespan. So there's another benefit that you totally miss out on, again, if you choose to do the financially easy option in the present and the financially hard option in the future.
X by Kevin at Large Fam Dad. That went really viral a few weeks ago. I want to read this to you, Jeff, and get your take on this, because he really kind of hits this head on. It's really interesting how he describes this challenge, this thought of like optimization of lifestyle versus having kids as a default. And this is what he puts. He says, my boss's boss is like 42, never married, no kids, earns $300K a year, goes on a minimum of 2 international vacations a year with his girlfriend, 10 plus days all out, eats the best food, stays top-notch accommodations, excursions, tours, nicest beaches, etc. Great guy. I'm happy for him. But what I've realized is that without kids, you end up chasing a lifestyle that has to continually be topped in order for you to be satisfied and find happiness. What he and others like.
Yeah, and also let's pause there. Okay, yeah. You chase the experiential lifestyle of where you're having to constantly top the last experience in order to stay happy. That's true, but you also have that lifestyle demands an insane amount of money. Okay, yeah, that guy's making $300K a year and going on 2 international vacations with his girlfriend, no children. That's an expensive lifestyle that has to be funded. And let me tell you, you can't fund that in retirement, and you're not always going to be able to work to the extent that you're working now to make that money. So it's not a good medium to long-term strategy financially. It's not a good medium to long-term strategy for happiness either, because your days of being able to do that are numbered. Okay? Your days of being able to do that are slowly running out. Okay? And you can't, I mean, it really, what it comes down to is thinking in the present and thinking in the future, okay? There's going to come a day when you can't work like that and you can't fund that lifestyle, okay? So what are you going to do? You're going to quit work. And then if you don't have children to take care of you, you are now spending your money not to go to luxurious beaches in the Bahamas, but to put your own self in a nursing home and pay people to take care of you, pay other people's children, okay? When you could have children who take care of you and your satisfaction continue to rise into your late life. That's the other alternative here. So when people say children are expensive, I'm like, expensive when? Are they expensive now or are they expensive later? Are they a hard money decision now or are they a hard money decision later? The answer, of course, is that they're an investment now that pays off in later life. And you actually, I would argue, end up getting, having a way better money situation if you choose to have children, than you will be if you don't.
Don't understand is that when you have children, seeing them experience life's most basic things and watching their eyes light up at all the firsts brings greater pleasure and joy than any vacation or travel experience ever could. Seeing them try blueberries for the first time, seeing them learn how to walk, seeing them giggle uncontrollably at peekaboo, seeing their excitement when building a fort out of cardboard. He says he's flying kites with them, seeing them perform a recital on stage. And this is how he concludes. He says, when you have children, all of a sudden you realize that life's greatest joys are not in the pursuit of things or pleasure or travel, but rather in the love and bond you share with your very own image bearers. Seeing the beauty.
And also, I love what Jeremy's reading, and I want to finish what he's saying there. But before he finishes that, let's also consider here the guy. Okay, let's talk about that boss for a second. That guy's making $300K a year, going on 2 foreign vacations a year minimum, with his girlfriend. He's not committing to marriage, family, or children. And he's seemingly happy right now. Okay, that's a temporary thing. Let's talk about after that guy dies, which there's a day when he's going to die, so that's coming for him. After he dies, he will have literally zero impact on the future with his current lifestyle. After that guy dies, he will have literally 0 people who remember him after he dies. After that, guys, he will have 0 mourning for his loss, because all of the people who could mourn him will either be employees or peers who are dying about the same time as him, or nobody. He's not going to have continued his family line. He's not going to have continued any kind of legacy. His money is going to be given to someone else who is not his blood, because he has none. He has nobody to give it to. And all of that work that he's put in was really just for him to individually have a good time on the planet. It wasn't really doing anything lasting for anyone else. It's kind of selfish, again, assuming this guy's not doing anything unselfish with his money, which I don't know. I'm not saying you can't be generous. I'm just talking about having kids being a smart financial decision and a good happiness decision for you, and a way to impact future generations that go beyond your own. And so, again, he's going to miss out on those things with his current lifestyle if it never changes. All right. So I just want people to be aware of that. It's not like that's this ideal lifestyle with no setbacks and no drawbacks. It's really like, what do you want to give up and what do you want to get? That's really what you have to ask yourself when you're answering this question.
And magnificence and wonder of life all over again for the first time through their eyes, and expressions give you something the world simply cannot offer, nor even come close. So this collision between, there's almost like these two paths. I love it because he's laying it out as like, okay, here's path A, optimization, constantly ratcheting up your lifestyle, always chasing bigger highs, more exciting things, or sort of starting over through the eyes of your children. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it reminds me of David Brooks's kind of first mountain versus second mountain kind of analogy. And I think that's where, that first mountain is the mountain that everyone tries to climb of ambition, money, success, do all the things. And then most people tend to come off that mountain and realize life was not about that mountain. Life was about the second mountain, which is meaning, purpose, family, etc. I would argue that I think that family and children, while it is not absolutely, of course, the only vehicle, I think it is the primary vehicle that drives people down off the first mountain. I think you realize it puts things in perspective as what life is about, right? That sometimes just an ordinary dinner where you have kids that love you and you love them, and there's giggling and there's laughing and there's storytelling for an hour and a half on a Friday night with some candles and some pizza and some messy food and some messy toddlers. You're like, that's the meaning of life, right? Compared to the bank account or the vacation to Fiji. And I think it takes sometimes the kids to do that. It takes marriage to do that. It takes family to do that. And even people that are, not married, I still think that, I would say even single people, it's the same thing. Their families, right? Their parents, their adult siblings and stuff like that can have the exact same effect where you realize the meaning of life is actually relationship. And I think that's just a huge conduit of that.
Yeah. And just drilling into what I think is probably one of the most underappreciated possible ways of viewing this whole dilemma, why it's so almost obvious to us that we should optimize for personal fulfillment and freedom is because we think we're playing a single player game. And we really made that case to our own kids. And so I want to play for you a video. James, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Sudar Sono. I love his videos. They're so insightful, but he really does something we've been trying to say for, years and years of family teams. And that is that there is a completely different way to frame family, from just the nuclear family that restarts every generation to beginning to think about it multi-generationally. And that actually makes a lot more sense of what we're talking about, why somebody might choose to say, hey, kids are worth it. Yeah, they're expensive. Yeah, it's challenging. But they're not just a lifestyle choice. If we were living like multi-generational families, I think this would become the default. So let me share with you a little bit about how he describes this.
What if we built businesses and livelihoods with multiple generations of our families, so that the older generations could contribute things like capital, wisdom, experience, while younger generations drive forward with their energy, with hustle, with innovation? And what if retirement just looked like becoming the more passive roles in the family business to gently give guidance and direction as the adult children took the baton? And what if we homeschooled our kids and brought them into the businesses that we're building, so that by the time they're 18 years old, they have more than a decade of experience, not sitting at a desk waiting for freedom, but working with mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, seeing the business up close? What if we lived near and even with our parents so that multiple generations of the family get to share all these moments of their lives together and build these rhythms of doing business and life together on a daily basis? What if generational wealth, all the assets in the portfolio, all the investments in the trust, get to be the support structure that upholds and furthers a life spent pursuing a God-given calling for your family? And what if this was how we were meant to live all along?
Okay, that's where I'll wrap this episode up. But you can see the kind of the point I've been getting at is if you're approaching life that way, where your children are seen not as drains on the family financial bank account, but as assets for the future, for the financial future of the family, then you're not complaining about how much diapers cost. You're rejoicing about how much that child is going to add to the family, both financially and emotionally, in your later life. That's really what this comes down to. Okay? So if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, why did you decide to have a child? Kids are so expensive. Kids are so expensive. Diapers are so expensive. They eat so much food." Then you can say, expensive when? Expensive now or expensive later? Okay? When are children expensive? Yes, there's an investment on the front end. Yes, there's some money you put into it. But that money pales in comparison to the amount of money you save in later life and the amount of money that is brought in by that child in the future. That is, if you raise your child, again, to take care of you and take care of the family, going to directly impact your quality of life in later life. So again, expensive when? Expensive now or expensive later? Because I can assure you it's more expensive in your later life to not have children. Okay, so thank you guys for listening today. Let me know what you thought of this YouTube video through the link in the show notes. If you enjoyed, reach out and give me your thoughts on the topics discussed by Jeremy and Jeff today, as well as your opinion on the topic. Would love to hear from you. It'd make me feel super connected to you guys as audience members, and it would make this podcasting system two-way. You can also reach out to us on social media through Restoring Rapport, Instagram or Facebook page. Would love to hear from you there. So thank you so much for listening today, guys. God bless you, and I will talk to you next time.